Leo, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. So my name is Leo. Should I give my background?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so I've been writing code since I was like 8 years old. I have a Master of Engineering from France, and I spent the last 10 years in Silicon Valley. So I had the privilege to work in small companies, closely with the CTO, involved in acquisition procedures. I worked with company with 100 people that grow into a unicorn to like 600. I was able to work closely with the leadership team in setting up processes to be ready for the scale. I witnessed what worked and didn't work across those years. In San Francisco, we also get to meet so many interesting people with so many different backgrounds. And one of my skills is to be able to suck all that in and be able to identify processes that succeed and processes that we should avoid. So throughout my career, I realized that what I love actually is to solve puzzles. That's why I loved writing code. And I realized that I can solve puzzles in other way by understanding processes and helping startups. I decided to move back to Europe, where I'm from originally. I'm from France. And I settled in Luxembourg a few months ago, where I created my company, Pure Lambda, where I help and advise entrepreneurs in their challenges related to product development.
Brilliant. That's why we have you here. So much experience. And I'd love to hear more about the processes and what works, what doesn't. So we're going to get to that. So the subject for today is, what does the CTO do? So let me start with that. And by the way, to the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And when we go to the brainstorming session, you will be also able to unmute yourself and just ask them then. But as we go through this interview, feel free to put them in the chat. Leo, so let's start with the goals of the CTO. What is the CTO supposed to achieve? What is the goal of that role?
So in my opinion, the CTO is here to build a product. And so most of the time it's a software in a software company, and it's not easy. There's a lot of moving parts. So it comes in a lot of dimension, and there is also different stages of the company. So the role of the CTO at an early stage company is not the same as like a multi-million large international company.
Excellent. Yes. So let's talk a little bit more about those stages. So can you tell us, so how many stages you think are there, and what is the difference between them?
Yeah. So the different stages of a company, in my opinion, and if you look around, most of the people agree on the stage as the boundaries move around a little bit. But in my opinion, there is really the small startup, pre-product market fit with like about 10 people. Then there is a growth stage, usually after Series A, when you are in the middle of building foundation to grow. And then there is a late stage when you become like these multi-million-dollar companies that are international. And I don't know if that would be very interesting to talk more about stage 3 in this meetup. I think we should focus on stage 1 and 2. That's more interesting, I think, for the audience.
I think this is actually a very good question. And this is actually a good moment for me to pause for a little bit and conduct a little poll to find out a bit more about the audience, because then we'll know what we want to focus on. So let me do that right now. I've created the poll already before the meeting. I'll just need to start it. So if you give me one moment. Right, and launch. Right, so this poll is about your role currently. It's actually not about the size of the company. That would actually be another interesting question, which I didn't put there. But if we know who you are, that will also help us find out where you are on your current stage. I can see already a few answers. 13 answers. I actually can't reply myself. I'm surprised. I thought I can respond, but I cannot.
Yeah, I've got a question or a call out, is that you can be more than one in the way you've got a radio button, so you can only be one of these things, and I'm sure it's like more than one.
Yeah, I thought about it. Actually, I was creating the poll that you could be more than one. Can you just pick the one that you think fits the most, or maybe the one that you would like us to focus on? For someone in that particular position, we can think about what sort of knowledge they would like to hear. So that maybe from that angle, just pick one. All right, I think we have everyone. So by the way, do you guys see the results or not? No. Okay, so let me see. How can I publish?
I hope you do.
And Paul, I think I have to click share results. How about now? Can you see them? Yeah, so it's quite a split. We have 3 CTOs. We have 3 engineering managers and the VP of engineering. We have 1 CEO. We have entrepreneurs. Let me scroll down a little bit. We have 5 consultants. So consultants win today. Great. And 1 other. Peter, what did you choose?
BizDev.
Oh, BizDev. Okay. Right. So so we actually have quite a diverse crowd in that respect. Leo, so let's take that into account because we have to talk about this from all angles. Now let's actually do it like this. So you talked about those 3 stages of the companies. So first, a small startup, sort of middle of the road, and a larger one. Maybe let's do a simple poll in the chat. Which ones you guys would like Leo to focus on? So if you think a small startup, 1, middle of the road, it's 2, and a large one, can you say again, Leo, what would be sort of the cutoff points in the number of engineers between them?
Yeah, I think the stage 1 will be less than 10 people in search of product market fit. Stage 2 is after Series A, after product market fit in the growth phase, and then stage 3 is like beyond.
Got it. Okay, let's have a look what the chat looks like. Right. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so a lot of people are asking about stage 1 and 2, and a few answers about stage 3. So I think that's kind of what we expected, right, Leo? So stages 1 and 2, I think, would be the primary focus, and maybe a little bit of stage 3. All right, so let me move on. So Leo, so can you tell us a bit more about the goals and the skills in stages 1 and 2? What do you need to achieve, and what do you need to achieve that?
So the CTO in phase 1 is more of a technical lead. He will be hands-on, writing the code, helping the team succeed, be more of a software architect. And it's actually an interesting challenge for entrepreneurs. A lot of non-technical founders are always asking if they should hire a CTO. And often I tell them, be careful if you hire someone that you call the CTO, because when you get the growth phase and you're going to want to hire someone that will be a CTO, you're going to have a conflict of titles. So I would recommend to hire someone that is really hands-on, like a technical lead or a software architect. And sometimes you can hire like a fractional CTO that will come a few hours a week just to make sure everything is on track. So for me, the technical leaders' skills in stage 1 are really about flexibility, hands-on technology, be able to produce code like a maker. And I think the flexibility is really important because as you're in search of the product market fit, you're going to have to throw away, rewrite, change very often. So you don't want someone that's really, focused on like one little thing and in love with it. You want someone that's able to be flexible, be like, okay, now we move on. That's a new style of the phase.
I love that. This is very interesting, especially when you said about the conflict of titles. You hire someone at the initial stage to do the hands-on role, and then maybe later you need somebody else to do the role when the company is bigger.
And it's not always true. There is something called, some people call it the CTO career chasm from stage 1 to stage 2. I like to call it a transition from maker to thinker, and it's kind of like this transition where you have to like let your hands off and let your team build while you do the thinking and the architecture as a strategy. And so that can be the same person that evolve in his role, but it's a new skill. It's a lot of new skills to acquire in terms of management, processes, organization. And that's what the stage 2 is mainly focused on, is like building the foundation so you can grow from. So it's all about putting processes in place, delegating, building teams so that the growth can happen effectively.
Excellent. I love this. So let's briefly move on to stage 3. So stage 2, you talked about processes, you talked about strategic thinking. So how does it differ in stage 3?
So in stage 3, it's more about even longer term planning. It's more about PR, public relations, building the culture of the company. Make sure like you're focusing on recruiting marketing. You know, it's like writing articles, going on talks, doing public appearances, making sure that your company is seen as like the best place to be for work. And you have to do a little bit of that prior, but stage 3 is really the start of it, because you're gonna have a VP of engineering, you're gonna have a product designer, a product manager leads. So you're going to have a lot of people that do a lot of the hands-on things, and you have to do more of the long-term thinking. So maybe you're going to have to do like big contracts with big customers, presentations, this type of thing.
So that brings me on to the next question. So what does the CTO actually do on a day-to-day basis? It seems like the CTO does something completely different in stage 1 than in stage 3. So can you tell us a bit more about it? So what does the sort of an ordinary day of the CTO look like in each of these stages?
So I think in stage 1, it will be like checking with your team. It's like, you know, being the agile leader, being sure everybody's on track, making sure nobody's blocked, and then acting as a software engineer, writing the code, and then at the end of the day, or depending on how you set up your team, make sure everything's on track. And because you're still the CTO, and sometimes it's even the co-founder, you're gonna have to meet with investors, maybe doing some pitch, doing some explanation. Especially if you're like in the founding phase, you might have to be under scrutiny during the due diligence phases. So a lot of meeting, a lot of coding in stage 1.
Yeah, got it. So the next stage then?
So in stage 2, it's more about setting up processes. So you're gonna meet with the leaders. You usually interact a bit less with the makers, and you're gonna have to do more of the strategies. Like this component needs to talk with this component. What protocol can they use to communicate? You're gonna have to focus on the marketing, not for user, marketing for recruitment. So writing blog articles, going to meetups, making sure your company is seen as a good place to work, because hiring is one of the big challenges of today's technical landscape. You're going to have also to be aware of new trends. If a new technology arises, if a competitor is building a new product, so you're going to have to be able to see several steps ahead and guide your product towards these long-term goals.
Got it. So we have a few questions already in the chat. Nanban, so you asked about managing equity and salary. Let's postpone it for later. That's definitely important. But for now, I'd like to sort of stay on the subject of what does the CTO actually do. And there's a question from Mati about the Scrum Master. So isn't the role of the Scrum Master to keep team on track technically?
Exactly, and that's what I was saying. Like on stage 1, when we don't have a lot of people, the Scrum Master might be you. And then as you grow and you are able to hire one, then you can delegate this part. So the transition from stage 1 to stage 2 is really about delegation, finding all the things you were doing in stage 1 and finding other people to do it for you so you can focus on the bigger picture.
Got it. All right, so so let's talk a little bit about hiring, managing equity and salary, because this is something that Nanban asked about. So can you already give some hints on that? So say you're hiring a CTO, or maybe you're becoming a partner, you're starting a company with somebody else who will become the main techie, so to say. How would you manage the equity and salary, especially that perhaps in the future you may have to hire a more experienced CTO and also give them some equity? How do you resolve that?
So to be honest, I'm not an expert on all the budget, finance, and equity. That's not my expertise. I'm more into like the product thinking strategy. But in terms of like I think being fair is the key here. Is like, depending on at what point you hire the person, if they are hired early and you need to manage the risk and the reward. So if you pay them a normal CTO salary, then the equity can be as low as zero. If you put them on board as a co-founder and you don't pay them, then the equity needs to be equal to the risk they take. Like if someone joined with no salary, you might not give them 50% of the company, but if you start and you are just two people, it might be at most as like almost as much as the founder. So you need to see what is the risk from this person point of view and make it worse for them to take this risk. And that will be based on your location, that will be based on your industry. So it's hard to answer.
Okay, got it. Let's talk about challenges. So what are the greatest challenges that stop CTOs from succeeding, especially in those one of those first two stages?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenges for the CTO is hiring the right people, because you have to delegate and you need to find the right talent. And it's getting harder and harder to hire as more and more companies are needing more and more engineers. The other challenge is to keeping up to date with the ever-changing technology and kind of like letting go of your ego, because you're gonna hire amazing software engineers that are gonna know more about it than you, because they are hands-on on the technical landscape. They are building it, so they're gonna tell you about this new framework or technology you have not heard of, and it's all about being like, okay, tell me more, and being able to analyze and learn, I think, is a critical aspect of the job of the CTO. And also being able to project yourself years in the future and be like, if we do that today, that will allow us to do that later, which will allow us to do that later. It's kind of like a big, chess board where like you need to plan your move ahead of time.
Got it. Yeah. So we have a few more interesting questions from the audience. So Claire is asking, do you recommend CTOs delegate work to other technical leads in stage 2, the growth stage?
Yeah, so you want to look at how people behave. Maybe if you already had, among all your engineers, one of them shined as leader of the team during stage 1, as you transition to stage 2, you might promote them to being the leader officially. Another strategy at the beginning, when you're in this like blurry transition period, is instead of having title, it's having roles. So instead of having a Scrum Master, you will have the person that's responsible for the Scrum management. And you give this role to one person for a month, for 2 months, and you can rotate. Maybe someone else wants to do it now. Kind of like you will have your list of chores with roommates. You do the Scrum Master this week, then you do the manager next week, or the reporting. And that can be a very good strategy to find out which one in your staff is the right key person to promote to this role permanently.
Got it. We have a great question from Red Davidson from Dallas, Texas. But Red, this question actually is so good. I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit more about this in the brainstorm. So I'll skip it for now, because this is a subject where I think everybody may want to contribute. So I won't forget about it. Aaron, yeah, interesting comment there. I have a hard time hiring because I have a hard time giving up control. I have to say I'm guilty of that as well. So do you have some advice for us, Leo?
Yeah, it can be hard at first. Depending on where you're based, the employment laws might be more or less flexible in terms of hiring and firing. So if in your location it is easy to hire and fire, take risk. I mean, what can happen? Like, sit with the person for 2 months, do code pairing, sit next to them, take it like almost as an intern, like just to test if the person works, and give them a small task at first to test their abilities. And if you see that they're succeeding, give them something with more responsibility, and, slowly grow the trust. It's like if you are 3 people and you hire the third person, you don't want to just let them, wild and trust their entire company on their shoulders. So you want to really like grow the responsibility slowly, grow a relationship, grow the trust, and then you can, feel free to trust them for projects.
Got it. Great. Christina is asking, is it necessary to have architects in stage 2?
I think this question, the answer is very specific to the industry. If you're building, a website or a marketplace, that's something that has already been done before, and you can just reuse what's there. Especially, it's like one of the thing I wanted to point out later in the conversation is also about the no-code trends that are coming up, and especially in stage one. But we can talk about it afterward. But the architect might be necessary if your tech lead doesn't have those skills. But usually, if you are a tech lead, you should also have some concept of software architecture. And I think it might be okay at the beginning of stage two not to have an architect, but I think you're gonna feel the need when your product is becoming more complex with more separated components. At some point, you're gonna see technical debt starting to pile up, and you're gonna see your engineer being like, I named this thing over there dev, but over there it's named development. Like, you're gonna need someone that oversee the architecture of your company, and the nomenclatures, like the namings of things, is just one aspect of it. But the protocol between components, the way they are hosted and deployed, the processes, like you can leverage the skills of an architect in those fields. But I feel like nowadays the architect is like blurry with the CTO. Like it really depends on your industry. Like if you're building a game on a mobile, like a mobile app, you might not need one. If you're building like a complex system with different servers and platforms, and you sure need one.
Got it. All right, this is going to be the last question before I sort of open the stage. I really want to ask you this because you wrote an interesting article about emergent behavior and how it applies to management. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is emergent behavior and how is it relevant to the work of a CTO?
Yeah. So if someone follows me on Medium, on my Pure Lambda account, you're gonna see that I like to write a lot of articles that blends different industries and fields. And so for this one, I merged one of my favorite fields in computer science, which is called multi-agent system. And it's one of my favorite AI fields that is not very used a lot nowadays, but I love it. Like all the genetic algorithms, the simple rules to create big behaviors. I love this thing. And I was like, there's a thing to it. When you look at a city, it's people interacting. When you see a company, it's people interacting. And you can also simplify the people to agent and be like, what if we look at simple rules we could implement in the workplace so that you don't need strong rules that say, okay, you need to do this, this, and this. Instead, you put simple rules that will create incentives that will trigger emerging behaviors. And so an example, for instance, of multi-agent system, just to summarize what an emerging behavior is there is a famous example of the termite and the wood. It's like a simulation. You have an agent. The only code it carries is if I work randomly. If I see a piece of wood, I put it on my back. If I see another piece of wood and I have one on my back, I put it next to it. That's the only code there is. And after running long enough, you end up with one perfect circle of stack of wood. It's perfectly circular and there's only one. And you're like, nobody in the code, there's a circle, there's no radius, there's no pi, there's no location. And this behavior is emerging because the surface exchange of the small circle is smaller than the big circle. So with time, there is more chance for a termite to end up on a big circle, and that's how it gets bigger and bigger. And so it's amazing. So that's the idea behind having simple rules that create big behaviors. And so, for instance, one simple one is like, why don't you block lunch out of meetings from the top down? Like the leader is like, it's forbidden from noon to 2. And one fun consequence is that first, people have more time to spend time with their family, maybe go out for lunch. Another consequence that is interesting is that people that are bored at lunch because there is no meeting at this moment, they might start setting up lunch and learn with their colleagues. And then you're gonna see other things starting to pop up. And so it's example of like simple rules that can have unpredictable consequences. And it's true in the other direction. You can set up simple rules you think that can trigger very bad behavior. So for instance, you can be like, I want my code to have like 4 spaces tabulation everywhere. And you're like, that's simple, right? And then your engineer will be like, okay, I need to enforce this rule. So you're gonna have a pull request with the code and someone will point out, here you need spaces, here you need spaces, and then it will be back and forth. And you're gonna extend your merge time by like 2x. And then engineer will start to argue. It's like, but no, here you don't need a space because that's the next line of the parentheses. It's like its own block. And So it will create a nightmare, a toxic culture without even thinking about it. And so the solution to that, for instance, is to automate this behavior. You don't want to tell the engineer, you just want to put systems in place that automate the styling when you merge. And so it's funny to kind of think about it, like every inflection, rules, even if they're not like written in the handbook, can have a large consequence on the culture and the relationship between the engineers.
I love it. Yeah, I think this is fascinating and quite illuminating that a simple rule can have very far-fetching consequences that may even be difficult to predict sometimes.
It's an entire field of science trying to predict what those little rules will create.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I'm going to open the stage and I'd like to start with the question about environment. Red, do you have? Because I can't see. Actually, let me change the view. Let's do it like this first. I'm going to change the view to gallery. One moment there. All right. Yeah, so if you could unmute yourself, you've already unmuted yourself. Can you please maybe elaborate a little bit? Because your question was about the toxic environment that we see in Silicon Valley and how to prevent it. So can you tell us a little bit more about what do you mean by toxic environment and describe it a little bit?
Yeah, so I work primarily in very large IT and big banks and such, and it seems to be exactly the same problem, but we see about it in the headlines more in Silicon Valley, where it's misogynistic or racially based. You know, it becomes a boys' club, essentially. Technology does. And even though we say we understand that diversity leads to better solutions and whatnot, there's still something innate in us that's, you know, where somebody achieves power, they want to hold that over other people. So it's very rare in organizations where people design their culture. And so I've now gone to the other side of, yeah, CTO needs to worry about technology and whatnot, maybe delegate that to other people. They own designing the culture. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with a, you know, take a look at your favorite company in Silicon Valley. They've all got horror stories. And it does not do, if hiring talent, hiring the best talent is the biggest problem we have, then you've got to create an environment that draws that talent in, not repels it.
Absolutely.
Leo, yeah, so what do you have comments on this?
I agree with everything you said. We need a more diverse and inclusive companies, workforce. And I think there is this like race of trying to get the, like from the employee side, they will sacrifice going to a toxic culture just to have the line on their resume. Mm-hmm. And that needs to change, because the same way that, you know, you vote with your money when you buy a product, you also vote with your time when you work for a company. So I think that will be interesting for people to realize that the engineering space is crazy right now. You can get a job very easily to the company you dream of. So if you're in a toxic culture, quit, find a new job. From the company point of view, if you don't want to have this toxic culture, it's really hard, because you need to identify like the bad apples in your forest. And because it's enough with one person that will do a thumbs up on another person in a recruiting process to hire a second one, and then you have this like pyramid where like just one person is able to corrupt your entire industry, your entire workforce. So you need to very control the hiring and make sure that the people you hire are people that are resonating with your value, and your value should incorporate a diverse and inclusive environment. And I think, I mean, I'm not an expert and there's a lot of things to do in this space, but having the capacity for the employee to complain and be heard if an event happened, and having like decision done by the leadership team when those complaints arise, rather than being like, okay, I've heard you, but I don't care. I think that's important. Like really having consequences when someone behaves badly.
Yeah, got it. Tolls from London is commenting, we don't get any CV from women though. What would be your take on that, Leo? And
so I think there is like a big thing that a lot of companies forget. It's the recruitment marketing. it's the same technologies, the same techniques you will use to market for users and customers, but you want to market for recruitment. You want to be on meetups, you want to write articles, you want to describe what it's like to work for you so that the right people apply to your company. You want to show that you solve challenges. Like some people that I've told that to told me like, yeah, but my company, we're not doing anything new. And it's like, yeah, but you have challenges. Just talk about that. You don't have to write article about solution. You can write article about problem. And then someone will be like, I know how to solve this problem. Can I come work with you? And you also want to show the problem you solve is the problems that matter. And you're going to find people that want to solve this problem with you. Like maybe you want to reduce carbon dioxide, and like people will be like, oh, I want to solve this problem with you. Let me come work with you. So being public about what it looks like, what the inside of your company looks like, I think is important.
Got it. Magdi, you asked two interesting questions on the chat about preventing tech debt, how to prevent it to become a redesign, and also about writing business models. Whose role is it? Would you like to comment on that?
So hold on, can you repeat the question?
I
I was trying to find it in the chat and then I got distracted.
Yes, I was just thinking that Magdi, you could unmute yourself and ask it yourself.
Yeah. Okay. I've seen a lot of teams that they have created apps and softwares, and they added more pile of debt, technical debt along the way, and they say we don't have time to fix, we don't have time to bring new technologies and whatever that is needed to solve that technical debt, but they end up becoming a redesign.
Yeah.
After all. So how do we prevent this from happening? How do we solve this technical debt along the way, although keeping on track and releasing more frequently?
Yeah, so I think what's important to understand with technical debt is that it's a debt. It's the same way you would want to buy a house, you make a loan, and that allows you to buy the house today instead of having to save money for 10 years. It's the same thing with technical debt. You loan time from the future to be able to build your product today. And so the way you repay these debts can take different shape and form. So the first one can be you block every, Monday morning to do one small technical debt. Like you have a backlog of tech debt, you need to keep track of them and tag them as like technical debt, and then maybe weight them. This one is hard, this one is easy. And you can allocate maybe 1 week per quarter or 1 day per week to just focus on that and bring everything back up to speed. The other thing is like, you said you want to avoid redesign, but sometimes redesign can be good. Like what if you could just sell your house, get the debt back, and buy a new house from that, So you just get rid of the debt and start from scratch. It can be also a good strategy. Like having all this debt, make a scrappy prototype just to get a few customers, and then, redesign something from zero that works from your learnings, making those technical debt will teach you what not to repeat. And your next one might work, So it's like, it depends on like the nature of the technical debt. Is it something that is impeaching you every day that needs to be fixed today? Is it something that is like a big rock that might fall on your face tomorrow? Is it is it something that that blocks the customer growth? Is it something, if it's in a part of the code that gonna change, might not fix it today and just change it, with a new one. So it's like really depend on the kind of technical debt and the kind of time you have. But this type of like rush, like 1 week, well, we just do that during a quarter. You can even make it a game, like how many tickets have you closed during this week, and then you win a prize at the end. Like you can make it a fun event. But if it's a debt which is in a part of the code that you're gonna replace soon, who cares? You're just gonna replace it.
Yeah. Does anybody have any comments on this, on technical debt as well?
And it usually comes from the leaders, like the top down, to allocate time to pay back those debts, because like I said, it's a loan you make on the future. So at some point you're gonna have to pay it with time. Like you can't pay it any other way. Or you can hire a consultant and then you pay it back with money, but you might not like the result of the fix.
Yeah, Mike, you also asked about business models. Can you also clarify that? What do you?
So, like I said, the business is really not my expertise, but the thing I really like in a business model is when the incentives are aligned. For instance, you want the user to pay when they get their, so the goal of a startup is to solve a problem, right? And your solution is supposed to solve this problem. You want to make money when this problem is solved. And that will create an incentive for you to solve it better and for the user to be happy when they pay. There are companies that have the problem over there and you have to do this windly detour to be able to charge the user before they get to their problem. And so your incentives in this situation will be to make the wind even longer. And so you will have incentives to make your user experience worse so that you can make more money. So having your business model align with the incentives of the users is really, really important, so that you have the motivation to make their experience better, because that's when you get rewarded.
Got it. I could see there was a lot of conversation on the chat. There's still some very interesting questions, and I think I'd like to ask them. So, how much time? There was this question: how much time you should spend researching the domain of the business versus the technology?
So I think the domain of the business is something that as a CTO you have to do, but it's a lot of the CEO job to do the business specific things. It needs to communicate to you what the business wants so that you can make the product that will answer this demand. But having said that, you build a better product if you know why you build it. So I think, it's hard to do like hard coding number, but maybe like 2/3, 1/3, like 1/3 of like meeting your customers, meeting the people, like knowing why you do what you do. And then the 2/3 on the internal type of things, especially in stage 1, stage 2. In stage 3, you have your product good to go. You don't, like, your product is almost autonomous at this point. You can focus on the larger picture and more on the outside world.
Got it. All right, so we still have almost 15 minutes left. So I'd like to reset the conversation. I'd like to do that at the end, and we're going to do the breakout room session.